Welcome everyone to the CALeVIP South Central Coast Incentive Project, the pre-launch webinar. We have a packed schedule and I think we'll get started right now. So Jane, could you, next slide please? My name is Peter Call with the Center for Sustainable Energy. Today you will hear from both Fidel and Dean from the Center for Sustainable Energy. They'll walk you through the different program. And at the end of the program, Brian and a number of other panelists will help answer any questions that you might have. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, we would ask everyone to submit their questions in the chat box, and we will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. We have a number of viewers that continue to build, and this is quite a heavily scheduled event. So if we do have any technical difficulties during the presentation, we're going to apologize in advance and let you know that the presentation out after. We will send it out tomorrow. Also, information is available on the CALeVIP website. As well as available in the CEC docket. Next slide, please. What we'll go over today is Dean will walk us through the overview of CALeVIP. We will talk more specifically around the specifics around the South Central Coast Incentive projects. We will talk, and Fidel will talk more specifically around the eligibility of equipment and equipment requirements. He will also walk us through the application process, and we'll end today's session with a question and answer period. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dean to talk about the overview of CALeVIP.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks everyone for joining us for the pre-launch webinar for the CALeVIP South Central Coast Incentive Project. First, we'll just go over the main goals of the project. So CALeVIP was designed to implement targeted incentive projects at a regional level to offer incentives for the purchase and installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure at publicly accessible sites throughout California. The program puts those projects in place to streamline the application process in EV charging, get funding into the EV charging market in a rapid manner. This allows site hosts and EV charging companies to provide convenient access to charging infrastructure across the state in order to promote transportation electrification. Next slide, please. So funding for the CALeVIP program is provided by the CEC. It was authorized or reauthorized, extended through 2024 through California Assembly Bill 8. And that funding is set in the Clean Transportation Investment Plan. For funding in the South Central Coast Incentive Project, it is also supplemented by 5 co-funding partners. That's 3CE, San Luis Obispo Air Pollution Control District, Clean Power Alliance, the Air Pollution Control District of Santa Barbara, and the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. Next slide. So the South Central Coast Incentive Project will provide incentives for both level 2 and DCFC chargers, as well as combination installations. It's open to all businesses, nonprofits, workplaces, multi-unit dwellings, public facilities, and light-duty fleets. The program is designed as a first-come, first-serve program with a few exceptions. In the South Central Coast Center project, there's a minimum of 50% of the funding in each county is required to be invested in disadvantaged or low-income communities. And this is a minimum investment by technology type. There's also set aside, so a minimum of 25% of the funding is required to be invested in unincorporated communities in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. This minimum investment is enforced by county, not technology type. So CSE will be accepting applications next month. We're in the process of optimizing the application processing platform to ensure an error-free and equitable user experience for all applicants. So as I said, CALeVIP launch date for this project will be a new date in August, which will be announced in the coming weeks. So CSE will update all parties on the status of the launch so that everyone has sufficient time to adjust and prepare. Approach that launch, we'll update everyone with the timing. Next slide. So the South Central Coast Incentive Project promotes easy access to zero-emission vehicle infrastructure for the purchase and installation of eligible electric vehicle chargers in San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties, with a total of about $12 million in available funding over 2 years. Next slide. So as I said, the total $12 million of funding from both the CEC and funding partners. And I won't go through it, but folks can see the graph here that lays out the funding by county as well as by funder. So when we send this out, folks can see the detailed breakdown. Next slide. So turning to applicant eligibility requirements, applicants must be the site owner or have site owner authorization to install. So this requirement will be reviewed later in the presentation in more detail when Fidel goes through the application process. Applicants must be a business, nonprofit organization, California Native American tribe, or public government entity based in California or operate as a California-based affiliate. Those organizations that are required to register with the California Secretary of State will need to be registered, and CSE will verify this in the application process. Those organizations not required to register with the Secretary of State will need to provide additional documentation, such as deeds or local business licenses for verification. All applicants must submit a signed site verification form within 5 calendar days of application submittal. And please be sure that all the information on that form matches what was input in the online application. In order to receive funding for the through Clean Power Alliance, you must be a customer of CPA and enroll in available demand response programs to receive any funds that were contributed from CPA. And customers for the 3CE are the only eligible to receive funds allocated by 3CE. Next slide. So to go into a little further explanation of the DAC and low income requirements. So disadvantaged communities is defined as sites and census tracts that are in the 75 percentile or higher for using the CalEnviroscreen 3.0 tool. And for low income communities, that's defined in Assembly Bill 1550 and is defined as census tracts at or below 80% of the statewide median income. Next slide. I think this is where I could pass it over to Fidel to start to go over the rebates.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. So as shown on this slide, level 2 rebates for the South Central Coast Incentive Project will be composed of 3 components: the base rebate, the disadvantaged community, low income community adder, and the multi-unit dwelling adder. The base rebate will provide the lesser of $3,500 per connector and 75% of project costs. The level 2 connectors installed in a disadvantaged community and or low-income community site will receive an additional $500. And level 2 connectors installed in a multi-unit dwelling site defined as 3 or more units within a structure will receive an additional $2,000. And note that all components can be stacked for a maximum rebate of $6,000 per level 2 connector. Next slide, please. Now turning to direct current fast chargers, the rebates for direct current fast chargers are divided into 2 power level tiers, the 50 kilowatt to 100 kilowatt tier, and this is excluding 100 kilowatt chargers, and the 100 kilowatt and above tier. For the 50 kilowatt to 100 kilowatt tier, sites not located in a disadvantaged community or low-income community can receive up to $30,000 per charger, which is defined as a dual standard charger with both CHAdeMO and SAE CCS combo connectors. Sites located in a disadvantaged community and or low-income community can receive up to $40,000 per charger. For the 100 kilowatt and above tier, sites not located in a disadvantaged community or low-income community can receive up to $60,000 per charger, and sites located in a disadvantaged community and or low-income community can receive up to $80,000 per charger. And note that all final rebates here are capped at 75% of the total project cost. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we've reached our first poll question of the day. We'd like to hear from all attendees, so don't be shy. The question is, what kind of electric vehicle charger are you interested in applying for? So please take a moment to answer the question.
60%, approximately 60% are looking at the combination of L2 and DC fast chargers. Around 25% are level 2, and around 17% are DC fast chargers.
All right. Thanks everyone for your participation. Next slide, please. So for those of you only looking to install direct current fast chargers, you're eligible to receive a rebate for 1 to 4 chargers. And for those of you only looking to install level 2 chargers, you may receive a rebate for 1 to 10 connectors. And for combo applications, those are combination applications with both DC fast chargers and level 2 connectors. You're eligible for up to 4 direct current fast chargers and up to 4 level 2 connectors. Also note that your installations may surpass these limits, but will not receive rebates beyond the limits indicated on this slide. Next slide, please. So moving on from rebate limits to equipment requirements, all equipment must be new and installed at the site for the first time and must appear on the CALeVIP eligible equipment list. The eligible equipment list is updated monthly as we are made aware of new equipment that meets the eligibility requirements. Also note that equipment on applications may be swapped like for like. To appear on the list, level 2 chargers must use the J1772 connector, and direct current fast chargers must use both a CHAdeMO and a CCS connector on each dispenser. All chargers must be networked, including remote start and remote diagnostic capabilities, as well as being able to log charging session data. Level 2 chargers must sign a networking agreement for a minimum of 2 years and direct current fast chargers must sign for a minimum of 5 years. Level 2 chargers must be capable of 6.2 kilowatts or greater, and that's per connector. Direct current fast chargers must provide at least 50 kilowatts of power, with chargers providing 100 kilowatts or greater eligible for a higher rebate, as we previously discussed. Level 2 chargers must be Energy Star certified, though this does not apply to direct current fast chargers for this project. And all chargers must accept at least 2 forms of payment and some form of credit card, be it on the dispenser, through an app, or a toll-free number. Note that beginning January 1st, 2022 and January 1st, 2023, all public-facing direct current fast chargers and level 2 chargers, respectively, that require payment will be required by Senate Bill 454 to have EMV credit card readers, also known as chip readers, among other requirements. Direct current fast chargers and level 2 chargers installed before those dates must add credit card readers by July 1st, 2033, or when replaced. And finally, all chargers must be approved by a nationally recognized testing laboratory program. Next slide, please. Now, switching from equipment requirements to site requirements, specifically for direct current fast chargers. All direct current fast charger sites must be well lit, secure, and in compliance with all federal, state, and municipal laws, ordinance, rules, codes, standards, and regulations. This requirement actually applies to all sites, including level 2. All direct current fast charger sites must also be publicly accessible at all times, and this means that they cannot be in a gated area closed to the public at any time. Additionally, the primary use of direct current fast charger sites must be one that is listed on the slide. And just a reminder, this slide deck will be distributed and will also be available on the South Central Coast landing page and on the CEC docket. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, all sites must be well lit, secure, and in compliance with all federal, state, and municipal laws, ordinances, rules, codes, standards, and regulations. Level 2 sites must be shared use, meaning, for example, that a single charger is not dedicated to a single tenant in a multi-unit dwelling or a single employee at a workplace. However, it is not a requirement that they be publicly available. Primary site uses for level 2 chargers are more expansive than for direct current fast chargers, but they must fall into the categories listed on the slide. And to note that curbside installations are allowed for level 2 chargers as long as the installation happens on the same block as another eligible site type. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have now reached our second poll question of the day. Just a reminder that we'd love to hear from all attendees, so please take a moment to answer the question. At what kind of property are you most interested in bringing EV charging to?
And there's the poll results as it stands today. Public facilities, 37%, followed by commercial and MUD, multi-unit dwelling.
All right, thanks everyone for your participation. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's go over the rebate cap limit. This rebate cap limit is on the dollar amount of active applications, meaning applications that are in fund reserve status, where the applicant is working on designing the project, procuring the equipment, making the installations, and commissioning the equipment. Once an application is completed and the rebate is paid out, then the funds associated with that application is removed from the application's dollar amount of active applications, and the applicant is then eligible to apply for more funds. The dollar amount of active applications is tracked using the applicant's tax identification number and is capped at $640,000 for the South Central Coast Incentive Project. Next slide, please. Here's an example of how the rebate cap limit works. Say ABC company files 3 applications in Ventura County. The applications are for $200,000, $260,000, and $180,000. And these add up to a total of $640,000, which is the rebate cap limit. ABC company may submit additional applications, but none of the additional applications in Ventura County can have funds reserved until the dollar amount of its active applications in Ventura County drops below the rebate cap limit. This means that the company must finish and receive the rebate for at least one of the projects to file additional applications in Ventura County. So let's assume that ABC company completes the requirements for the $200,000 application and receives the final rebate. This means that ABC company's active applications in Ventura County now add up to $440,000. And as a result, ABC company can now apply for up to $200,000 in new applications in Ventura County, or can have funds reserved for any additional applications in Ventura County adding up to $200,000. Next slide, please. So what can the incentive funds be used for? Generally, funds can be used for any costs associated with the installation of the electric vehicle chargers, be it the electric vehicle supply equipment, the make-ready infrastructure, the labor and materials installation costs, energy storage, or any of the other items listed on this slide. An important thing to note is that all of these eligible costs can be incurred on or after June 2nd, 2021. These costs are incurred at the applicant's own risk before the associated application's funds are reserved. However, once funds are reserved, all incurred eligible costs can be covered with the final rebate, as long as the application meets all other requirements. Next slide, please. In contrast, these are the ineligible costs. Permit and inspection fees are by law ineligible to be rebated by CALeVIP. Any installation, materials, equipment, and other costs that are not related to the electric vehicle charger installation are not eligible to receive a rebate. Additionally, costs paid by other rebate or incentive program/projects are not eligible to receive a rebate. And finally, solar panel costs are not eligible to receive a rebate because they are funded through other California Energy Commission programs. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about a couple of key documents for keeping your applications on time. First up is the site verification form. The site verification form can be downloaded from the South Central Coast Incentive Project landing page, as well as directly from the link embedded on the slides, which will be distributed, and can also be found on the CEC docket and on the South Central Coast Incentive Project landing page. This form must be submitted within 5 calendar days of submitting your application. Otherwise, your application will be canceled automatically. So it is highly encouraged that you fill out this form as soon as you know you will be submitting an application. And also please note that the information on the site verification form must match the information on the application. Next slide, please. The second key set of documents we'll talk about is the evidence of permit or utility submittal. This set of documents is due 60 calendar days after the date of your funds reserved status. To satisfy this requirement, applicants can submit either evidence of permit submittal or evidence of utility service design. For applicants going the permit route, this means submitting a copy of the permit application, a copy of the permit plan set, meaning the full set of plans required to support the permit application, and a copy of the payment receipt for permit application submittal indicating that it has been accepted. For applicants going the utility service design route, this means submitting a copy of the utility service application, the full plan set submitted with the utility service application, and a copy of the payment receipt for the application submittal. Next slide, please. We will now go through the rebate process for direct current fast chargers and combination applications. The first step is to apply online, which we will go through in more detail later, and then submit your site verification form within 5 days of applying to avoid cancellation. After submittal of your site verification form, the Center for Sustainable Energy will review your application to confirm that all of the eligibility requirements are being met. This includes applicant eligibility, site eligibility, and equipment eligibility. Once review is complete and an application meets all eligibility requirements, the Center for Sustainable Energy will move the application to the funds reserved stage, after which applicants will have 15 months to complete installation. Applicants should receive notifications of this date through the applicant dashboard and through email. However, applicants only have 60 days, that's 60 days after their funds reserved date to submit their evidence of permit submittal or utility design submittal, which we went over in the previous slide. Next slide, please. In step 5, applicants must upload all remaining documents, and we'll go over this list at the end of the presentation. Note that the system does allow you to upload documents before submission, meaning that they are 2 separate actions. And this is designed to help applicants prepare their full submission. However, this does require applicants to press submit after all documents have been uploaded. So please don't forget to press submit. Step 6 is an optional step only available to direct current, fast charger, and combination applications. This step allows applicants to request a milestone payment of up to 60% of the reserved rebate amount, up to 8 months after the funds reserved date. The milestone payment is intended to provide the applicant with a portion of the actual design and permitting costs during build-out, and applicants must submit at minimum a copy of the signed application form, permit, paid design, engineering invoice or receipt, and additional documentation may be considered. Finally, once the Center for Sustainable Energy has reviewed the documents from your final submission, applicants may receive their final payment. Next slide, please. Now we will look at the level 2 only rebate process. It is very similar to the one we just went over with a few notable exceptions. So step 1 is the same. You apply online, and within 5 days, provide the site verification form to avoid auto cancellation. Step 2 is also the same. CSE performs the initial verification, confirm that all eligibility requirements are being met. After this initial verification, the application moves to the funds reserve stage. And here is one of the changes from the direct current fast charger and combination applications. For level 2 applications, you have 9 months to complete installation. 60 days from the funds reserve date, applicants must submit evidence of permit submittal or utility design submittal, which remains the same as direct current fast charger applications and combination applications. Step 5 again remains the same. Upload and submit the final documentation, and please remember to submit once all of the documents have been uploaded. For step 6, note that there is not an option to receive a milestone payment, another notable difference from direct current fast charger and combination applications. Instead, the application goes straight to final payment once the Center for Sustainable Energy has reviewed the documents from the final submission. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've gone over the rebate process, let's focus in on the application process itself. Next slide, please. Before going through an example application, we want to provide you with a few application tips. So the first one is to avoid submitting multiple applications for a single installation site, one site, one application. In that single application, please submit the maximum number of chargers you're planning to install at the site. Again, one site, one application. Also, please note that if less funds are available for your project than you need, you should still submit your application. We will reach out to you if additional funds become available for your project. And I'll remind you that these slides will be sent out and made available online on the South Central Coast landing page and on the CEC docket. Next slide, please. Before starting an application, applicants will need to create an account at CALeVIP.org. Note that unique login credentials are required for each person submitting applications, so please do not share login credentials with anyone else, even others at your company. CALeVIP also does not allow submissions by bots or other automated processes, and CALeVIP reserves the right to cancel applications that use any method that could disadvantage other applicants. Applicants may create an account in advance, so just head to CALeVIP.org/user/register, or from the main CALeVIP.org page, you can click on the login button in the upper right corner and then select Create New Account. Next slide, please. Once an applicant is logged in and has begun their application, the first step is to go through the process of selecting the equipment that will be installed. To do this, applicants must first identify the installation site type. And as we previously discussed, the site type will determine which charging equipment applicants are eligible for. So you will not be able to select equipment until the site type has been identified. Remember that the site type is determined based on the primary use of the site that the chargers will be installed on. After selecting the installation site type, applicants can select the make and model of the equipment, the number of connectors for the make and model, and the quantity of make and model being installed. And then the installation type, whether the charging infrastructure is new, whether the chargers are being installed on existing stub outs, or if the chargers are replacing older non-network chargers or being installed on make-ready infrastructure. Please note that for sites with multiple make and models being installed, applicants will need to make these selections for each make and model. After selecting the charging equipment, applicants must select a network provider. And we do recognize that the network provider may not be known at this time, and there is an option to indicate that. However, please remember that a network services contract will be required for each site before approval of any rebates. Next slide, please. So the next step is to review the terms and conditions of the incentive project. These outline the project requirements and can be found on the implementation manual link that is provided on the slide, as well as on the South Central Coast landing page. We highly encourage applicants to review the implementation manual ahead of time. And also a quick reminder that these slides will be distributed and be made available online, both on the South Central Coast landing page and on the CEC docket. So please take the time to read and understand the project requirements before beginning the application process. Example topics that are included in those requirements as detailed in the implementation manual include the authority to apply for the site, the voluntary submittal of personally identifiable information that is provided on the application, and the consent for CALeVIP to share information. Once applicants have reviewed the terms and conditions, you can click accept and continue. Next slide, please. So after agreeing to all project requirements, applicants must fill out the remaining information, beginning with applicant organization questions. The applicant organization for CALeVIP is the entity that will be incurring the project costs and receiving the rebate, meaning that invoices and receipts for costs and payments will need to be under this entity's name. The applicant organization can be a variety of entities, ranging from businesses, public entities, nonprofits, etc. And this will need to be noted on the application, as well as the applicant organization name and tax identification number. These should also be noted on the application, and they should be clearly associated with one another. The applicant organization address will also need to be provided, as well as the applicant organization's relationship to the site, be it site owner, electric vehicle service provider, contractor, etc. Note that most of the remaining questions in the application will need to be answered from the perspective of the applicant organization. Next slide, please. The next set of required information is answers to the following declarations, again answered from the perspective of the applicant organization. These declarations relate to bankruptcy, legal actions threatened or pending, loan defaults, and outstanding judgments. Next slide, please. The next section will ask information about the application manager, meaning the primary point of contact for the applicant organization. Basic name and phone number will need to be provided for this person. Next slide, please. The next category is the installation address. A very important note here is that the installation address cannot be updated after submission. So please pay extra attention to the installation address that you indicate on the application. We understand that some sites may have multiple addresses, but please identify the most accurate address for the installation location on the application and double check for accuracy before submission. So here at the bottom, you will see some of the required information for the address, including information such as county and cross streets. Next slide, please. Additional questions related to the site will be asked, including identifying the business or organization that is physically closest to the chargers, whether the site is located on tribal land, affordable housing status for multi-unit dwelling sites, and public accessibility questions. Also, if the power provided for the site is either Central Coast Community Energy or Clean Power Alliance, applicants will need to provide the site's electric service account information to be eligible for partner funding. Next slide, please. Some informative questions that will be asked for research purposes include if there is an existing need for chargers, and if so, who has that need? If a fee will be charged for the use of the chargers, who will own the chargers, who will operate the chargers, and information about how much parking exists on the site and how much of that will be dedicated to electric vehicle charging. Next slide, please. Continuing the research questions, we'd also like to know who will be claiming the potential value of low carbon fuel standard credits generated by the electric vehicle charging stations. This will help us better understand how these credits are factoring into decisions around these installations. Next slide, please. So after answering all of the questions from the last few slides, applicants may then press submit. After waiting a few seconds for the application to be submitted, applicants will be brought to their dashboard, which will indicate that the application has been received and will display a summary of your application details. This dashboard is also where applicants will upload documents, starting with the site verification form. And remember that this is due within 5 calendar days after submission, or the application will automatically be canceled. So please have your site verification form ready in advance of submission to facilitate meeting this timeframe. And please remember to submit, press submit after uploading your document. Next slide, please. In addition to the site verification form, applicants are required to submit a variety of documents listed here. Remember that the evidence of permit submittal or utility service design submittal is due within 60 days of the funds reserved date. A signed application form will also be required. The design invoice, copy of the permit, equipment purchase invoice, and installation purchase invoice are also required and need to indicate that they have been paid. For any applications that require electric vehicle infrastructure training programs, certified electricians for installation, a completed and signed job site installation form will be required, which includes the applicable electrician names and certificate numbers. We'll go over this requirement in a bit more detail in a few more slides. A final inspection card will also be required for each application, as well as 2 photos of installed and operational equipment. Photos of the equipment serial number for each individual charger that is installed. A copy of the networking agreement for the minimum term, which is 2 years for level 2 chargers and 5 years for direct current fast chargers. And if applicable, a copy of the utility service. Additionally, examples of the documents listed here and proper submission procedures are linked on this slide and available on the South Central Coast landing page. Please reference that and ensure that all your documents are submitted correctly the first time to receive a rebate as rapidly as possible. Also note that we have created a CALeVIP voluntary invoice template to use for all your invoices. It is linked here on the slide and is available now on the South Central Coast landing page. We highly encourage applicants to use this template to create greater efficiency for the application review team and help speed up the review of application documentation and help provide applicants with rebates more quickly. Next slide, please. The installation data form is also required to be completed. This is an online form that becomes available once an application moves to funds reserved. The form covers various stages of the installation process, from procurement and permitting all the way through final installation. So we encourage you to fill out this form as you progress through your installation to facilitate its accurate completion. Next slide, please. All right, so now that we've walked through the rebate amounts, eligibility requirements, the application process, the rebate process, and we've discussed all of the main documents, let's take a step back and summarize some of the key takeaways. Again, applications will open next month to eligible properties in the 3 counties and the South Central Coast Incentive Project. That's San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. All applicants should complete their site verification form before applying so that it's ready to submit well in advance of the 5-day deadline. Also, please make sure that the applicant organization name and installation address are entered into the application and site verification form accurately, as they must match and cannot be updated after submission. This last point we've only briefly covered, but it's an important one to keep in mind. Use of electric vehicle infrastructure training program certified electricians consistent with Public Utilities Code section 740.20 will be required for all applications that move to funds reserved after September 1st, 2021. This includes any applications that may have already begun construction prior to September 1st, but did not move to reserved fund status until after September 1st. So please keep that in mind as you are planning your project. Next slide, please. After this webinar, we encourage you to stay connected with CALeVIP. Linked here is the California Energy Commission docket for CALeVIP. That's 17-EBI-01. On that docket, you can submit comments anytime, view all submitted comments, download past presentations, and eventually this presentation as well. You can also sign up for the CALeVIP email listserv by going to calevip.org and scrolling to the bottom and filling in your information in the Stay Up to Date section. With that, I'll turn it back to Peter, who will moderate the Q&A session this morning. Peter?
Thank you, Fidel. As Fidel mentioned, the presentation will be emailed out tomorrow, as well as available on the CEC docket. We have a number of questions coming in, but one of the first ones I want to do is just make sure that everyone is aware of a change that we had. So I would ask Dean, can you just talk a little bit about the date that we have for the South Central Coast launch?
Going to be launching the South Central Coast Incentive Program in July. Or I'm sorry, not July, August. We are going through and optimizing the application platform to ensure that we have a smooth rollout. And we will, while we don't have like a firm date right now, we will keep folks apprised of the situation and give folks notice as soon as possible as to when the date will be.
Great. Thank you, Dean. So these are the people that are available for comments. We will likely direct the majority of them to either Brian or to Fidel. Next slide, please. So again, just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And a couple other logistics, the presentation will be available and emailed tomorrow. A recording of this webinar will also be emailed all to the attendees on the 23rd. The application, as Dean mentioned, will be open next month. And so with that, I will open it up to questions. So I'll read off the questions that are being submitted. First one I have for Brian: Coast CALeVIP interact with other programs? Can customers participate in this and other programs?
Sure. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so again, my name is Brian Fauble. I am the project manager for CALeVIP with the Energy Commission. So interaction is on mainly looking for stacking of rebate funds. We allow it for programs outside of CALeVIP that do not have a set or designated amount of chargers that they're allowed to install. Most of the time, these are the larger IOU approved, CPUC approved programs for their level 2s, where they have been approved in their pilots for a set amount, 3,500 or 7,500 level 2 connectors, and they cannot go over that. We do not allow stacking with programs such as that because we want to leverage funds to spread the dollars more to get additional chargers. So the IOU programs are the ones that you might want to double check with, because those likely are not going to be stackable. But if there are other local utility, POU, or air district funds available, those typically are stackable. And CSC does coordinate with those programs to assure that we're not double paying for eligible costs, and that applicants are not trying to profit off of government funds.
Great, thank you, Brian. Next question for Fidel. Fidel, are the rebates per connector or per dispenser? For example, a dispenser with 2 connectors, is that considered 1 or 2?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Rebates are per connector for level 2, and for DC fast chargers, it's considered as 1 per pair of CATMO and CCS connectors. So you might think of that one as 1 per dispenser.
Great, thank you. Next question from Fidel. If the utility side of infrastructure upgrades are needed for a potential project, how would that be financed? Or is it expected that the rebates will help cover for that?
Yeah, so generally, if costs are related to the installation of the chargers, they can be covered with the rebate. However, the rebates are capped at 75% of project costs. So you shouldn't expect that the rebates will cover all of your costs.
Great.
Yeah. If I can add to that, Peter, for all project installations, all the costs really, it's up to the applicant to make sure they have the funding available to incur costs themselves when they're applying. The rebate is not upfront, and you will have to incur your costs through the life of the project until it's completed and have your payment issued at the end. So for all your costs, make sure you have your financing or funding available, especially public agencies. It's really hard and understand to go through the process, but there are time limits here. So if you have to secure funding, that's going to eat into your time limits, especially that 60-day deadline to have a permit in hand, or permit application submitted. So make sure, I'd just say that's really important to make sure you have your funding available. For the infrastructure side, yes, work with your local utility or your appropriate utility. Some of those costs are sometimes covered by the utility, but the other sides will be eligible towards the rebate. But again, you're not going to get those funds until the end.
Thank you, Brian, for that. Next question. To this one, these slides are going to be available. They will be emailed to attendees tomorrow. And the recording will also be available on the 23rd. Next question for Fidel. What are the rebate cap limits per TIN/organization?
Sure, so that's $640,000 per tax identification number / organization. And that's also per county.
Great, thank you. Next question for Brian and Fidel and Brian. Maybe we'll start with Fidel. Can the chargers include a load management system where at times due to the load limitations at the site?
My understanding is that yes, but maybe I'll pass this question on to Brian.
Yeah, so for level 2 chargers, the requirement is that the charger must be capable of 6.2, but must not always have to deliver that. We understand MUDs might not have that capability to fully, without upgrades, fully dispense the full power. So we're hoping that, you have to use our higher power chargers for the level 2s, but that, in the future, if you do upgrade a panel, now you don't have to upgrade the charger. So load management is allowed for level 2 as long as you're still using the eligible equipment. I'd also just point out that the data collection must still be at the per charger level and not at this managed system. So you can't, you have to have your data collection be available at the charger level, not the site level.
Great, thank you. Fidel, next question. Is there a time limit on expediting of funds from the date of receipt of funds?
So I assume this is referring to the milestone payment. And I'll remind you that this is only eligible for direct current fast charging applications and for combo applications. And the time limit there is 8 months from the funds funds reserved date.
Yeah, and if it's on overall how much time does an applicant have to complete the project, so outside of the milestone project or payment, level 2 projects have 9 months from when the date of reservation to complete the installation, and you should have all your documents really uploaded so that payment can be made, and fast chargers are 15 months.
Great, thank you. Next question for Fidel. Are rebates available for retirement communities that would not be open to public use?
So level 2 chargers do not have public accessibility requirements. So yes, they would be eligible. But DC fast chargers and combo applications are required to be publicly accessible, so they would not be eligible for direct current fast charger or combo application.
Great. Next question for Brian. Which service category is best suited for an A&E firm? A specific category would be most useful as stakeholders to accessible, qualified first statewide.
I'm assuming this is for CALeVIP Connects as a service category is not really necessary for the application. So if it's related to CALeVIP Connects when you want to create a profile or you're looking for them, I assume that you would want to look under installers or contractors for that category.
Thank you, Brian. I'll leave it on you, Brian, for the next question. Is there any requirements for the applicants to maintain, repair the EVSE for a certain amount of time?
So while there is not a requirement for maintaining and repair, we do have requirements and eligible costs that we are encouraged. So with our chargers being required to be networked and have a set network agreement of at least 2 years for level 2 chargers and at least 5 years for the fast chargers, those network chargers typically have a higher uptime because they know when they're down right away, and most of the time these repairs can be done with that remote start or remote diagnostics. Extensions longer than those 2 or 5 years required. If you want a longer network agreement, that is still an eligible cost if you want to go beyond that. And extended warranties beyond what the charger comes with is an eligible cost, and these maintenance agreements as well. So we allow anything related to keep this charger installed, but keep it running is an eligible cost, but there's not a definitive requirement that you must maintain a repair for X time.
Thank you, Brian. Next question for Fidel. If a public agency is looking to incorporate EV charging stations for private use, i.e. something that's not open to the public, is the agency eligible for level 2 charger funds or not, and not DC fast chargers?
Yes, that's correct. DC fast charging applications are required to, or at least installations are required to be publicly available 24/7. So yes, that they would not be eligible for DC fast charger funds.
Thank you, Fidel. And sticking with you, will you accept projects that start construction and are still ongoing to apply for the rebate?
Sorry, the question was projects that have started construction and are still ongoing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yes. So as long as construction has started after that June date on the slide, then they will be eligible to recover those funds, and they will have, I guess for DC fast chargers, they have those 15 months to complete their installation, so that they do have that time frame for finishing installation.
Great, thank you. Brian, question for you. Are third-party operators allowed to participate?
Yes, pretty much any entity that has a California business license in California and is in good standing with the Secretary of State is eligible to apply. Again, you must, if you're not the property owner, must have that site verification form completed and uploaded at least or within 5 days of your application being submitted, or your application will be canceled. So we recommend you have that site verification form completed today or as soon as you're applying, so that you can upload that. And it is available to download on the project's landing page.
Thank you. And sticking with you, Brian, can CALeVIP funds be matched with other EVSE funds, i.e. federal or VW mitigation trust funds?
So yes, again, we do stack with those other outside programs that don't have cap limits. So again, it's going to be important to look at the other programs' requirements. I think the VW sometimes has more stackable requirements on what's allowed and what's not. So for CALeVIP, we will allow anything besides those programs I mentioned that have cap limits on the amount of chargers, but still recommended that you follow up with the other program to make sure that they allow the stacking.
Thank you. Next question for Fidel. DC fast charging locations is limited to the 15 listed. Maybe the question more specifically, is the DC fast charging locations limited to 15?
I think the question might be referring to the different site types. So yes, as long as the site type is public facing and publicly accessible 24/7, the site type should be eligible, excluding, of course, the single family homes are not eligible for funding.
And I'll just add on to that. Yes, please review the slides and the implementation manual that lists the site types that are eligible for fast chargers. Not every publicly available site is eligible for fast chargers, as the site types that are eligible are chosen because they are typically on a driver's normal daily drive commute pattern, as well as offer the driver some amenities or something to do while they charge their vehicle.
Next question for Brian. Does the rebate program apply to schools wanting to put chargers for school buses?
No. So CALeVIP is funded from our light duty infrastructure funding at the Energy Commission's Fuels and Transportation. So while we allow fleet charging, it is light duty fleet. School buses would not be eligible. The Energy Commission does have their school bus replacement program that also has infrastructure tied to those awards, as well as the Energy Commission's medium duty, heavy duty unit is launching its medium duty, heavy duty block grant as well. So I would pay attention to that program as it is starting up.
Next question, Brian. So workplace chargers, can they be restricted to employees only?
Yes, for level 2 chargers, they can, again, do not have to be required to be publicly available and can be restricted to however they see fit to their employees, as long as, again, these chargers are shared use and not dedicated to a single parking spot, person, or vehicle.
Next question for Fidel. If we have installed an EV station this year before June 2nd, can we apply for this rebate? And I don't know if that is more on the submission process or if that relates to the EVITP. Fidel, do you want to talk about either one of those areas? If it's the submission process?
Sure. So the June date is for costs incurred that can be covered by the CALeVIP rebate. So if there are costs incurred before that date, then those costs are not eligible for the rebate.
And I'll just add, if a charger is already installed before that, no, it's not going to be eligible. This is for new constructions. While we recognize people might start construction early, we allow that at their own risk once the landing page is live. But if a charger has already been installed any time before that landing page was posted, they will not be eligible.
I'm sorry, next question for Fidel. For public schools, is the time frame for reimbursement 9 months from reserve of funds?
Yes, and that's for the level 2 sites that are installing level 2 chargers.
And will we have that? Fidel, are public schools eligible for DC fast chargers?
Maybe Brian, can you help me out with this question?
Yeah, so fast chargers are eligible for colleges, again, that are 24/7 access, but not for K through 12 schools.
More on eligibility. Brian, will gated communities qualify for an EV charger rebate?
So gated community, I assume, would be a multi-unit dwelling, would be eligible for level 2 chargers. Gated community of single family homes are not eligible for any chargers, as single family homes are not eligible for rebates.
Great, next question. We are looking to take advantage of the program to add charging stations. Would this type of site qualify for property owner verification? Fidel, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So the uses of the site are essentially what we focus on for eligibility. And here we focus primarily on light duty vehicles. So I don't think this site would be eligible. But Brian, if you have anything else to add, please chime in.
That's correct. This is for not commercial, light duty transit, for passenger vehicles, not for off-road equipment. So it would need to be light duty cars and not ATVs. But the site itself, a vineyard, would be eligible for light duty level 2 chargers for vehicles.
Next question. How will you enforce the new CTEP regulations? Will you allow the installs of non-CTP approved EVSEs. Fidel, can you take that one?
Sure. So we've updated our eligible equipment PDF to include for level 2 chargers, which have been approved or CTEP certified. And the answer kind of depends on the use of the site. If the site is public facing and will be charging a fee for the use of the charger, then CTEP regulation applies, and we will require use of CTEP certified chargers for those sites.
Thank you. Next question for Brian. Is there any requirements for the applicant to maintain repair the EVSE for a certain amount of time?
I think we answered this one earlier, that while we don't have a certain designated requirement, that we do have the warranties requirement and extended we have the networking agreement requirement for 2 to 5 years. Extensions are allowed, extended warranties are allowed, but we do not have a actual requirement to maintain beyond any certain time.
Thank you. Brian, can the charging station participate in demand response programs with utility companies to help alleviate load on the grid?
Yes, there's no restriction to have any participation after the chargers are installed.
Fidel, question for you. Is the 640,000 cap per tax ID per location? Previous EVIP programs had different caps for each county.
Yes, that's correct. The same cap applies to all 3 counties. So yes, the cap is by location.
Thank you.
Let me expand on it. Per location of county. So the cap is, you might have 4 sites in one county, each of them being, maybe $100,000 or so. It means you have $400,000 in one county through 4 sites. If you wanted to come in and do a $300,000 site, you would not be eligible because you would go over the cap, but you could continue in other counties. So the 640,000 cap is by each county, not physical installation.
Fidel, do you want to start with the next question? If SCE upgrades the infrastructure on the side of the property line, is that considered stacking?
I think that depends on the situation of the upgrade, but maybe I'll pass this question on to Brian.
Stacking is ultimately, if you're going to include the SCE costs in what you provide as the total cost of the project and seeking reimbursement, then yes, it's considered stacking. But again, stacking is really costs that you're paying, the applicant or site is paying for. So if SCE does not bill you for those costs that they are covering, then it's not going to be reported and not really stacking. If they are billing you for $100,000, but covering an additional 50 themselves, that $100,000 that they're not paying for is eligible to be used towards the total project and the rebate. But the $50,000 that they did not bill you for and they covered would not be eligible. So really it's always the cost that you incur and then who paid for what.
Great, thank you. Fidel, question for you. The city of Morro Bay has 2 charging locations that has chargers that are no longer working. Can they be replaced with this program?
Yeah, so that depends on the type of chargers. Our replacement policy is that replacements are allowed only for non-networked EV chargers or older inductive EV chargers, such as paddle style chargers. So if it's one of those 2 categories, then yes.
Great, thank you.
I just reference them to review the implementation manual that goes into more information about the replacement eligibility.
Brian, a question for you. Are there areas in Ventura County or Santa Barbara that are not that would not be considered for this incentive program for DC fast chargers?
There's not a regional requirement or ineligibility for fast chargers. The fast chargers are all open eligibility by project, installation site type, but there are not like blackout regions in any counties that say no. So I'm assuming you're looking similar to what Sonoma Coast project did, where certain towns were excluded. That is not the case in this project. The whole region is eligible.
Fidel, question for you. We started construction on a new multifamily affordable housing project back in 2019. We started this construction on the EV charging station portion of the project. We have not started the construction EV. Let me start again. We have not started construction on the EV charging station portion of this project yet. Would this make the site qualify for the program?
Yes, so as Brian mentioned earlier, as long as the installation of the EV charging station occurred after the date that our landing page went live, then yes, you would be eligible to cover those costs with the rebate.
And I'll just add that we've had a similar situation with other projects where it's a much larger project going on besides just the installation of the chargers. And again, this is going to be important because you'll have 9 months if you get reserved, you'll have 9 months to complete the installation of the chargers and have them be operational and open for use. And sometimes that means the installation, for your chargers, will have to have that final permit. And if they're going to tie that final permit to the larger project as well, that means you're going to have your larger project done and completed. So, if you're still 2 years out to completing the MUD, you're likely not going to complete in time and lose the rebate.
All right, thank you. Next question for Fidel. If we applied and got approval to install 4 DC fast charging stations and actually installed 10 DC fast charging stations, would the entire project cost count towards a rebate amount?
No, so that would only be the costs associated with those 4 DCFC stations, and the rebate would apply for up to 75% of the installation costs for those 4 stations.
Another question on eligibility. Would church, synagogues, or mosques be eligible for the rebate program?
Yes, for level 2, they would be eligible. However, for DC fast chargers, they would not be eligible.
Next question is, the chargers we plan to install are inside a gate that is open during normal business hours, but we do not intend to have access to the public. We plan to make it available to be shared for fleet vehicles. Is this acceptable, or is the intention for employees only use? Fidel, can you take that one?
Sure. So if the chargers are level 2 chargers, then yes, that is acceptable. We allow light duty fleets, and for DC fast chargers, they would not be eligible because requirement is to be accessible by the public 24/7.
Fidel, what happens if you apply and get approved, but you decide not to proceed with the project? Is there any penalty associated with that?
No, we just cancel your application, and then those funds that we reserved for you will become available for other applications.
And I'll just note, while there is not a set in place penalty today, CALeVIP 2, or our block grant 2 solicitation that will continue projects into 2022 and beyond, may have different requirements around applicant performance. So if you decide not to move forward, it's best to let the CSC team know as quickly as possible so that we can keep these funds moving to other applicants that are ready to install chargers.
Brian, a question for you or one of the partners. If a project has already received partial funding through a CALeVIP partner agency, would it still be eligible for the CALeVIP funding?
So again, it ties into our requirements that will say when the project started, that you're not incurring costs prior to the launch of that landing page, and that the charger was not installed already. As well, it would go to that specific funding partners program that to see if it's stackable. I'd say for commission projects, CALeVIP is not stackable with another energy commission project. So you'll want to check with that partner agency as well, as sometimes they won't allow their own funds to be used on another project that they are funding.
I'm going to go back up to a question, and Dean, if you want to take this, and I might be able to add on to it, but it revolves around the communication on the, though the launch date has not been confirmed, being this, and how far in advance will we be communicating to the public?
Yeah, we have moved the launch date out. It will be in August, but we do not have a firm date at this moment. We will let folks know and give at least 2 weeks notice so that everyone has enough time to prepare.
Thank you. Fidel, question for you. Is there a prioritization to fund applications within LIC DAC in the funding region?
Yes, so in each county, we will dedicate 50% of the funding for each equipment type, that's DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers, to both disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. So yes, we will be prioritizing funds for those installations.
Okay. We have a series of application questions as well. Fidel, generally, how quickly are applicants notified whether or not funding has been reserved for their projects?
How quickly are applicants notified of funds reserved? So typically it takes a little while at the beginning of the on the launch date, when a bunch of applications flood in, our rebate processing specialists work through those applications as quickly as they can, but there may be a delay of a few days to get those into funds reserved status, but afterwards that process should be more straightforward. And that also depends on how quickly applicants submit their site verification form, which I'll remind everyone that they should submit that within 5 days of application submittal.
And Fidel, would you say typically within 60 days of the launch date, most applicants or made available or made aware that funds are reserved?
Yes, that's accurate time frame.
Yeah, I'll add that there is not a notification. So if whether or not you get reserved, you'll get communication. They'll go through the first come, first serve process. If you're deemed ineligible or canceled, you'll be notified. But if you're just application 200 out of 200, and we don't, we run out of funds, that you won't get any notification to say you're not funded, because again, we leave the application list intact so that if funding does become available down the road, we can still utilize that application. So pay attention to the landing pages, funding visualization when it is posted, to see, at any point it'll show the status of fully reserved or how much is received or oversubscribed. And if you see it as fully reserved but you haven't received anything yet, that means that you're still just further down the queue and have not got to approval yet.
Fidel, for an application, if an applicant doesn't have their account available during the submission, will they still be able to submit the application?
Yes, but they may not be eligible for the for the partner funding.
What about applications for multiple facilities? What about applications, for example, libraries or city halls? Would that be eligible for a rebate program?
Yeah, so again, one application, one site, so it's also one site, one application. Please submit a separate application for each site. I think the only exception there is for large sites, which I believe is greater than 5 acres. Then we may allow multiple applications for those site types. But for all others, one application, one site.
Yeah, so again, typically an application's for one physical address, and to prevent gaming, there are methods that we have in place, that we're not going to allow, say a college has a food court and they apply for every single business in the food court. It's one application typically per parking lot as well. So we're trying to prevent people that want multiple applications all in one parking lot.
Fidel, will you accept projects that are still and are to apply to rebates?
Yes, but again, with the limitation that funds before that June 2nd date, costs incurred before that are not eligible to be covered by the rebate, so they won't be considered when taking that 75% of total project costs.
Fidel, a question for you as it revolves around EVITP. Where can I find more information around EVITP? Is there available information on CALeVIP's website?
Yeah, so that should be available on the landing page. But maybe, Dean, can you confirm?
Yeah, you can find some information in the implementation manual, as well as if you need more information about the program itself, you can go to the EVITP organization website, which is evitp.org. I don't know if Brian, if you have any other additional information.
I was just going to say, yeah, the implementation manual discuss what's needed for EVITP, pretty much showing the certification, the certificate. So we don't have that as that comes from EVITP themselves, but the implementation manual will reference what is needed.
Question here, Fidel. Will you be utilizing the application manager information for correspondence on the application?
Yeah, so their contact information will be what is used for all correspondence.
Another quick one for you. Do stacked funds need to be reported on the online application?
So stacked funds, meaning other rebates that they've received, need to be reported on the online application. I'm assuming this means on the online dashboard. So yeah, any costs that were covered by other funds that are considered stacked would, if you report them, then we would have to flag them down and through our rebate processing specialists identify them as ineligible costs. So those should be identified on the documentation.
Yeah, I'll add on that. So we're kind of cutting in and out, couldn't hear you too much there, but yeah, so on the application, I believe we asked if you have received any funding from everybody else. You don't have to, I believe, in the application itself get into that details. That's just to start the process that, hey, we need to figure it out. But also, like Fidel was saying, in the dashboard, we'll get into that more about who you got it from, what they paid for, etc. And that'll also just be part of the final invoicing process that you can go over with, you know, an individual rather than trying to go through an online process.
Great. Thank you, Brian. While you're on, if you're not a customer of one of the partner utilities, can you still receive funds from the CALeVIP program?
Sure. So yes, it depends again where we do have two partners that their funds do need to go to their customers, but there is Energy Commission funding as well in those regions. So the partner funds, you know, will first be used for applicants that are their customers, but that if all the CEC funds have been exhausted and there's just partner funding left, then you know, that's you're going to have to be their clients. But that's, I believe, just 3CE and potentially CPA, if someone could correct me on the CPA one or not.
Jane, would you mind just going to page 12 or 13? The question is, are 3CE rebates in addition to the amounts listed on slides 12 and 13? And Brian, if you could, or Jane, if you could move to slide 12 or 13.
So the 3CE rebates, so all our partner funding is already included in the total funding available for each county. So their funds go directly into CALeVIP to utilize the system. It's not going to be external. And so it's not in addition to these amounts. It's already just included in the total available funding for each region.
Okay, I think we've gotten all the questions. I'm just scanning again to see if I've missed any. Is there any final questions that we could answer? With that, I think then we will conclude today's webinar. As mentioned earlier, the presentation will be emailed tomorrow and also will be made available on the CEC website. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.